Good morning, everybody. There are still a few joining us as I speak. So I would say let's take a few more minutes before we actually fully start. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Get yourself a coffee. Well, I actually think we should get going because a fair of you are already here. I was expecting everybody to be a little late, but what do I know? I'm talking to teachers. Of course you're on time. Well then, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar Early Years in Computing, Where Do We Stand? Today's webinar will last approximately an hour with the last 10 minutes dedicated to questions to our guest speakers. My name is Giorgia Migliaresi. I'm the Head of Education at Prima Toys. And today I am incredibly happy to have Paul, Gerrie and Helen Cotton from Amazing ICT joining us to host this webinar. Amazing ICT is a Shropshire-based educational consultancy company which offers training, support and workshops in the areas of computing and online safety. As well as working for Amazing ICT, both Paul and Helen play an active role in computing at school, which all of you, I'm sure, are really familiar with. They also work for the National Centre for Computing Education as subject matter experts in primary computing, and they are primary education leads with their respective computing hubs. Sorry, I got confused. Their roles within the NCCE are aimed at supporting schools in developing their computing curriculum. You can find out more about the work that Amazing ICT undertakes through the website www.amazingict.co.uk. But now I shall pass the mic to Helen and Paul to start. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Georgia. Thanks very much. Welcome everybody to Early Years in Computing. So just like Georgia has just said, I'm Helen Cotton, and I've got Paul here as well, who I'll pass on to a bit later on as we get through this presentation. So we are very much going to be looking at technology and computing within the early years foundation stage, and really thinking about what the, how does the land lay at the moment when we've had that big turnaround and technology isn't part of the early learning goals for understanding of the world anymore. I'm just going to take this off here just so that's not getting a bit distracting. Okay, so where we were, and I don't know how many people on this call were early adopters or not. So if you were an early adopter, where we were would have been a year ago for you guys. But for everybody else, this was only just before the summer. We had our understanding of the world. We had our early learning goal for technology, where children were to recognise that a range of technology was used in places such as homes and schools. So you'd have had all sorts of bits of technology within role play areas, home corners and such like. And then we're trying to get them to use that technology, choose when they would use it, how they would use it, and for what purpose. So those are the areas that we were looking at. And very much in general, we really ought to be looking at this technology early learning goal and just keep continuing with these main focus areas. But I'm going to go through that in a lot more detail as we go through. So you can start to see, this will be very familiar to you as early years practitioners. We've got our 7 areas of learning. This hasn't changed dramatically, and we've got our characteristics of effective learning, which will run throughout the whole of those 7 areas of learning. And as we go through this webinar, you're going to see that actually technology and computing, and I'm going to sort of use technology and computing together, both of them we can weave in to all areas, all 7 areas of learning for early years, and how very intrinsic they are to the characteristics of effective learning. And again, we'll go through that a bit later on. So as we think about what those changes are, obviously we've got the new framework. So development matters for 2021. Obviously that biggest change was that there was no technology early learning goal. And when I've been speaking to early years teachers, thinking about what that impact it's going to have on schools and your setting in your classroom, where does technology come in? If the early learning goal isn't there, where are we supposed to put all of that lovely technology learning? Where are we supposed to be teaching it or not? So thinking about that, when I have spoken to early years teachers and looked at some of the research that's gone on behind this, I have noticed that there's kind of two main camps which are a little bit apart. So you've got those teachers and practitioners who are actually quite relieved that that early learning goal for technology or that technology part has disappeared. And actually there was quite a few other teachers and practitioners who were concerned. So we have those two kind of camps of thought there. However, my own personal opinion, and from reading, this seems to be the general consensus, is that actually technology is completely integral to everything, a lot of stuff that we do in our lives at the moment. It's absolutely intrinsic to the real life world that our children are growing up in. So whether or not you are in the, thank goodness that it's out, or you're in the, how am I supposed to get my children ready for the greater big wide world if technology is not there, whichever camp you lie in, what's important to know is that actually technology is completely part of the children's world, of our world, and it's going to be very much part of what they're seeing every day. So it is very much a significant part of their lives. In that sense, even if you are relieved or you're concerned, it's something that we need to continue to have in our settings and in our classroom, and continue to model using, and allow the children to continue to explore and find out and have a go at, a bit more hands-on with that technology. And remember, when I'm talking about technology and computing, I'm not just talking about sort of those programmable toys that the children can use. I'm talking about any type of technology, something that is useful for us to use to get a job done. So for example, the technology that you'll have had in your home corners, like your washing machine, your iron, or a power tool, or a camera. So these are not the types of things we're going to be taking out of the classroom. There's a link there which I think Paul's going to pop into the chat for you. So this is a link which will take you to an article. It's a very nice article to read. It's quite short. It's by Emma Gotto. She's actually from the University of Winchester, and she really does spell out quite nicely what the impact is on the early learning goal changing and technology going. So again, as I was talking to some early years practitioners, some of the ideas really around, why has it been taken out? Because that really was quite a big question mark as to, why, or what was the reasoning behind it? And a lot of people were suggesting perhaps the children have had and have got at home too much screen time already. And I think an important thing to remember here is that we all need balance, don't we? And if you are a parent of your own children at home, you will, I'm sure you'll be like myself, I've got two, and there's always that sort of trying to get that balance between how much telly, or we've got one of those Alexas where we can actually see the screen. So they're quite often wanting to be watching a screen or going on the iPad or whatever it is. That screen time, I'm always really aware of it. And I can completely understand where practitioners and teachers are thinking, actually, we've already got a lot of screen time. We don't want too much. And that screen time gets linked heavily with the use of technology in the classroom. A quick reminder here, technology doesn't have to be screen time, and learning about computing doesn't have to be screen based. And we've got some really lovely examples of some great equipment that we can bring into our early years settings, which are not screen based at all. And there really has to be this balance. So that article that I just mentioned, where Emma Gotto is talking about early years, she really talks about, if you are concerned that there is too much screen time going on, and actually you're quite happy that technology's come out of the framework, think about the child. And when I was an early years teacher, I had so many of these. The children who always seem to be glued to one area of your room. So I always had, it did tend to be the boys. There was always be a couple of boys who always wanted to be in the construction area, and I would have to come up with systems and ways, me and other people managing the room, to make sure that those children just were not stuck in that one area all the time. And really that reflects exactly what we're thinking about with screen time. If you are concerned that the children are taking too much time on a PC or a tablet or a laptop within your setting or at home, just think about, okay, well, what strategy can I use so that they're not just on that one area all the time? There are plenty of different strategies out there. We used the rainbow system, where the children would collect a colour every time they went to a different learning area. Once they've been in those different areas, they could have that coloured card and they could add it to their rainbow on the chart. If the children wanted a full rainbow, then they got their full colours and they got a certificate at the end of the week. And it just really helped us to manage their time, and it helped them with their self-regulation as well, so that they could choose a good balance of where they were taking themselves with their learning. So when it comes to that continuous provision time, yes, we don't want them always on the screen, but there is a plenty of opportunity to learn about technology and computing without a screen, but also we can help them with that regulation. We can help them and say, okay, you've been in this area a good while, let's go and try something different. So when it does come to that sort of debate as to, there's too much screen time going on, I think it's important, again, remember there's a balance, and we don't need to have screens to be learning about technology and computing. So this big question came up: if technology has been taken out, is it still relevant? Is it still something that we should actually be teaching? And we have already suggested that yes, it is really important still, because it is so prevalent to the rest of what's going on in the world. And excuse me, particularly with the pandemic, we want to make sure that the children are aware of how they can use technology to help them to achieve something. So are there any benefits to the children's learning when they are being introduced to different technologies and to computing? I think when it comes to this question, it's great to think about the benefits. We want the children to be able users. We want them to be able to decide what they're going to use and be able to say why. But I think the main link with early years and computing is the characteristics of effective learning. Now, with our characteristics of effective learning, you've got your playing and exploring, you've got your active learning, and your creative and thinking critically. Now, these areas have not changed. They're completely unchanged. That we haven't. That's still very much the skeleton, really, of where our early years framework is based on. And that playing and exploring when it comes to computing, we will start to look at computational thinking. In fact, that's coming up in a little while. And as we look at computational thinking, you'll start to see actually there's an absolute ton of links between computational thinking and the characteristics of effective learning. So for your playing and exploring, the children will already have been exploring different technologies, having a go, investigating. They might have done this on their own. They might have done this in pairs or together. For example, if you have got something like Mini-Mash in the classroom, or maybe you've been using a different, maybe this is like a CBeebies website, or maybe there was a camera, a digital camera in your home corner. Anything, any type of technology where the children are going to be investigating, quite often you'll get one child going up and having a look, and then they'll be joined by another one and maybe a couple of other children, and they kind of all sort of pour in and start looking at and picking apart, you know, well, what happens if you do this and what happens if you do that? So there's a lot of cause and effect being taught and practiced as they're investigating technology, and that collaboration that they're using and practicing again as they're doing this investigation is really important to their development and their learning. That active learning will really support the children's understanding, as well as they're really thinking about what happens if, and I'm going to have a go at doing this, and does it need to change? Does that work, or do I want to try something different? And that again brings in the thinking critically. So there's lots of different ways to think about this, but like I say, huge links to characteristics of effective learning as we look at using technology in the early years. When we're thinking about our programming toys as well, so things like your Bee-Bots or your Cubettos, then using these devices will very much link in with the characteristics of effective learning, because we are allowing the children to play, explore. They are actively learning as they have a look at these things and see what they can do. And then if they can't do what they want them to do, then they're going to have to reevaluate and have another go and really persevere. So although we've got technology as gone, I think we can safely say that actually it still needs to be very much part of what you're doing with the children in your setting and in your classroom. And this was very much picked up by Julian Grenier when he wrote about the revised early years framework. And I've just highlighted these bits for you to have a little bit of a read of. I'll just give you a moment to read those through. So we've got here a very clear link and really a very clear message that technology, ICT, computing is still regarded as really significant to the children's learning as a way to support them and here, as it says, their communication skills. There's a lot of tools that we can use to really allow the children to have a voice for all children, for children who perhaps are very quiet. Maybe their communication isn't where you'd like it to be. I know after this pandemic, we've got a lot of children coming into early year settings who they might be talking, but it's very difficult sometimes to understand what they're trying to say. And I think particularly this year, we've seen more of that than in previous years. So use the technology, give them the easy speaker, allow them to use the talking tins. Get them to, if you've got something like Seesaw in the classroom, get them to use the audio tool and allow them to record themselves. If it's Draw and Tell, the app where they can draw and then they can record what they're saying, allow them to do this because it's really going to help them to give that child a voice doesn't matter who they are, but it also really, really improves their communication skills as well. Gives them a little bit more confidence, I think, as well. So we can see that Julian Grenier's clearly said how important it is and significant it is still to the framework, even though we can see it's not in there per se. However, we have got the Birth to 5 Matters document. I'm sure you're very aware of this being available. It has been created by early years practitioners. It's been written by the sector for the sector, just to repeat what they've got there. But it's not statutory. You don't have to be using this, but you can use this alongside the new framework. And where the new framework might not mention technology, the Birth to 5 Matters document does. And you still can see very much that technology as part of understanding of the world is still guidance here that we can follow. It's very similar to what we will have seen previously for the early learning goal. And although we don't have the age in there anymore, it's just referring to range 5, we can still see how the unique child, the positive relationships and the enabling environments can support the children with technology. So if you haven't seen this, it's page 111 and 112. And I've just pulled out a few different examples of how technology is mentioned in the Birth to 5 Matters document. So we've got that, if you can see in that first speech bubble, supporting children to be curious in grappling with cause and effect. And the cause and effect is really important. It's a great way to really sort of help the children develop that understanding of cause and effect. Computing technology is a wonderful area to really develop that type of thinking. We've got different toys or pulleys or different pieces of equipment like your cameras, your touchscreen, your interactive whiteboard, all being able still to be used within your setting. And we can still use programmable toys as well to help the children to develop all 7 areas of learning. And at the same time, they're practicing some real life skills ready for Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and further on, because we have to prepare our children for the real world and what's out there. At the same time, we need to make sure that they're safe and making sure that the children are safe as they use different digital technologies, particularly things that are connected to the internet, is going to be very important as well. But no matter what we're doing, if it's online safety or if it's anything to do with the Birth to 5 Matters document, we are allowing the children to collaborate, we're allowing the children to share, we're allowing the children to talk about what they're using and experimenting with and investigating. And all of this is going to really help them develop as little learners. So I have already mentioned computational thinking. I'm going to allow Paul now to take over from me, and he's going to just go into a little bit more detail about computational thinking, how it really does link in with technology in the early years.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. So yeah, computational thinking, if you haven't already heard of it, so what is it and why should I know about it? So next slide please, Helen. Thank you. So I know we're today looking at EYFS, but thinking about when the children leave the early years, what is in the program of study, the paper study for computing in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2? And in the opening line of the national curriculum for computing in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, it says this: a high quality computing education equips pupils to use computational thinking and creativity to understand and change the world. A pretty bold statement, isn't it? Changing the world. So after they leave early years, they're going to be focusing and continuing on computational thinking and using that creativity as they move through the year groups. But computational thinking and creativity is something that we should be looking at in the early years. And what we'll soon see is probably we're doing a lot of those concepts and approaches around computational thinking that we didn't really notice we were doing anyway. Next slide, please, Helen. So what actually do we mean by the word computational thinking? And computational thinking is just literally a set of problem solving skills that we can use in everyday life. And if you hit the button again, Helen, it should bring that definition up for us. Okay. And then the next slide here is a poster from Barefoot Computing. A lot of people normally ask us, where's the best place to go for resources for early years? And I always think Barefoot is a really good place to go. All the resources there are free. I'm sure Helen will grab a link to the website if you haven't already heard of it into the chat box. So as you can see here, they've come up with the idea that there are different concepts and different approaches that make the computational thinker. And on the left-hand side there, we've got all the concepts, and on the right, we've got the approaches. It's worth pointing out that the concepts aren't more important than the approaches, and likewise the approaches aren't more important than the concepts. They are all equally as important as each other. Okay, next slide please, Helen. So early years does have lots of different resources. They've got lots of really nice activities that you can use and you can download. And normally what I point people to start off with is the guide to early years in computational thinking to start off with. And in that guide there, it's only, I think, 3 or 4 pages long. And it just talks through, what is computational thinking? Why should we be using it and thinking about it in the early years? And then they've got some really nice activities, as you can see. I did speak with Dr. Chippendale. Some of you might know John Chippendale from Barefoot and Kaz, and they did say that they are looking at making more and more early years resource because they have been really popular. At the moment, there aren't many linked to early years on the website, but they are due to make a lot more. Next slide, please, Helen. And as part of that guide, they've got the computational thinking for early years, which is broken down in the computational thinking into more simplistic terms. On the left-hand side, we've got the computational thinking skill. And on the right hand side, kind of broken down to more simplistic definition of what that is. And we've introduced, a lot of this language, for example, like patterns and tinkering across all those 7 areas of learning within the early years as well. And if you just spend a second looking at that slide, and as you look down that list, you probably start nodding saying, yeah, these are probably a lot of concepts and approaches that we find the children in early years doing. And Helen mentioned a lot before about play, didn't she? So about the tinkering, being creative and making things, working together, not giving up. You'll see all this in the early years. So why should children in the early years have to learn about computational thinking? Well, let's go on to the next slide, Helen. This is something that Helen does a lot on her course with Rachel. I'm going to ask you the same thing now if you've got access to the chat box. We've got a little nice little role play activity here with 2 little girls. I want you to just have a look at the concepts and approaches. Can you identify any concepts or approaches these children are doing in your observation? Just pop into the chat box. Are there any that you can observe the children doing from this activity? What concepts or approaches might they be hitting in this little activity? So please do have a little look, put your ideas into the chat box for us so we can all have a little look. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to persevere and they're going to keep going because that little kind of, what do you want to call it, a tower is probably not going to stand up straight away. It's probably going to fall down a couple of times. So hopefully the girls are persevering and not giving up. Excellent, Matthew. Vicky, tinkering, definitely they're changing things and seeing what happens. They're creating a tower. They're collaborating because they're working together. Sure, they'll be debugging it, won't they, along the way? They'll be thinking, why isn't this working? What can we change to make it sure that it does work? Okay, thanks, Vicky. Any more observations that we can make? Any more early years teachers in here? I know we've got a mix today of early years and computing teachers. Thanks, Max. Yeah, decomposition. Yeah, which part should we use first? How should we start building this tower? Yeah, evaluating, stepping back. Can we make it in a little bit of a different way? Yeah, logic, predicting. Well, what happens if we put this little post here and this little tower part here? What's going to happen? And eventually, hopefully, as you're going through all the lists, you'll notice that actually you're probably hitting every single concept and every single approach there. So even though this isn't really a computing activity, is it? It's nothing to do with computing. We can see how all those concepts and approaches linked to computational thinking are a part of a lot of the activities that you're already doing within the early years. And once you identify these, you can add these to your observations as you go along through the activities that the children are doing down in early years. And thank you, Helen. Next slide, please. And on the Barefoot website as well, they've got what they call prompt cards as well that you can download from the website. Barefoot's a completely free website. They've got all their resources completely free. There's no payment whatsoever. And they've got these kind of prompt cards with a lot of their key questions on that you can then take those questions into the other areas like your maths and your role playing, your construction, your writing, and so on and so on. And this is just another example here where, again, the children aren't doing any computing. In the picture, it looks like they're copying a picture of a dolphin from a book, aren't they? But we can ask those questions linked to the different concepts and approaches. So on the concept side, we could think, well, which part of a dolphin are they going to draw first and why? And on the right-hand side, that's what I have to say again, on the algorithm, they're following instructions, aren't they? They're following instructions of how to draw this dolphin for themselves. So those prompt cards are all available on the Barefoot Computing website. And then you can start looking at those questions and thinking, how can I relate those questions to a lot of the activities that children are doing within the early years? The last activity, Helen, is just one from Phil Bagg over at Cubetto as well. So again, Helen can quickly put the link into the chat box for us. So Phil Bagg, a lot of people might know Phil Bagg if you're in the computing world. He does lots of little resources. And here, he's got a little small activity. So stand up 3 figures around the Bebot, 1 ruler length away. And he asks, can you program Bebot to visit each figure? And again, we can decompose and say, well, which animal are we going to visit first and why? Can we use the same instruction again to get to each of the different animals? Yeah, why or why not? So we'll start to look at patterns and reusing code. And all of these concepts and approaches that children are learning in early years will certainly put them in good stead moving through into Key Stage 1, where they're going to continue a lot of these activities as well. And just looking at one of the Barefoot resources on the next slide, Helen, this is one of the many resources that are available. And when you download the resources, you'll see on this one, it's got a few activities in there. Remember rightly, it's got exploring their own environment and collecting things, creating a capture, taking and mapping out a journey, and discovering some seaside tangrams as well. And all these activities are there to encourage speaking and listening, as well as some of the early years mathematical concepts alongside the computational thinking as well. And this resource, these lesson activities, about 35 to 40 minutes, depending on which activity you're looking at. But what I quite like is it highlights quite clearly there which concepts and which approaches from computational thinking is this activity going to be looking at within the activity. And when you look at the lesson plan as well, within each of the different approaches or concepts from the computational thinking that it looks at, it's got a nice little column about all the questionings, all the questions that you can ask the children or of the children, and the kind of observations that you can make, so you can really do your assessment on the children as well. So lots of little resources on there. Do download them and check them out. And as you'll see, not all of them are again linked to computing. So when we think about this activity, children are going outside and they're collecting like things they can find, like leaves and bits and bobs, and they're coming back in and they're arranging them in kind of like a little pattern, stuff like that. So again, it doesn't always have to be about computing lessons, but we can certainly talk about all the approaches and concepts of computational thinking that we'll be hitting, which is still part of the national curriculum as they move through. So we're really preparing them very, very appropriately for moving into Key Stage 1 as well. Now on the next slide, I'm just going to move away from Barefoot for a second. And this
Paul, sorry, can I just interrupt very quickly? I can't put the links in as I'm sharing the screen, so I'll put them in just a while.
Brilliant, thanks Helen, cheers. And hopefully Helen can talk a little bit more about this in a second, but Helen's been working on her own overview of technology and computing as part of her work here at Amazing ICT. And I know she's going to be sharing this on her next course with Rachel. Helen, is there anything else you want to add about this resource?
Really just that you can start to see that you've got the area of learning on this document. So I've put together for every area of learning for each of the 7 areas, just just a few ideas of what you might want to do with your children, different activities that you might want to do, what the resources would be for those. I'm pretty sure none of them are bits and pieces that you have to pay lots of money for. There might just be a few bits and pieces that you'd pay for, but a lot of these are free. So, and then I've just put the link in there as to, what type of computational thinking would you be practicing and developing with the children as they go through these activities. And of course, like we've just been saying, any of those computational thinking behaviours and concepts and approaches are going to heavily link in with your characteristics of effective learning.
Brilliant, thank you, Helen. So she'll be sharing that on her next course, and she'll be talking about her next course towards the end. So I want to have a quick look at coding devices and actually focus on actual computing lessons now and using these devices. And the bottom right there is just taken from the birth to 5 miles from the range 6. And with the technology that's available in terms of computing, a lot of what we're going to be looking at in terms of devices are still away from the screen as well. So just reduce that screen time rather than always going on computers and iPads. And as we put there in the notes, we're exploring the technology. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to be tinkering, finding things out, what's not going to work, debugging it, looking at patterns. So again, we're hitting a lot of those computational thinking concepts and approaches again. Now, I must admit, when I first started teaching, there wasn't a lot out there in terms of coding devices. I think every school that I've worked with over the many years, everyone's got Bbots. I definitely should have bought shares in Bbots. I'd be rich right now. But that was probably about it, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot out, especially for early years or lower down the school. But now there is. It's quite plentiful, and there's quite a lot out there. I'm not going to go through everything that's in my office because we could spend an hour just going through what I've got in here, and I could talk to you for an hour about all the stuff that I've got. But I just want to focus on a few of them, and then on our website under the robotics and kit section, you can see that our team have talked about a lot of the different technology that's out there and kind of put it into where we think it might fit in terms of early years, key stage 1 and key stage 2. But as you'll see in a minute, what you'll find with a lot of this equipment is it can be used, from early years right through to key stage 2 even, when we look at some of the stuff that's available. So the first one that I do want to look at on the next slide, please, Helen, is Cubetto, and I've got Cubetto here. The name Cubetto, obviously, because it's shaped like a cube. Very, very child friendly for the children as well, and also very important down in early years. It's very robust as well, so it doesn't break very easily when we drop things and things like that. So it's a little small wooden robot, and here he is, and he's quite big, so the children can all see him very clearly. We're working in a group as well, which I quite like. It's very noticeable to have a look at. It's got certain constraints too. Bbot, so it can only move forward, left and right. It can't move anything up else but 90 degrees. But what you do get is this control board as well, which again, very nice and clear setup, very nice and simple. And the children have to put in the different color coded blocks. So we've got green for go, we've got red for right. Always remember this because red starts with R and right starts with R. Yellow's got an L in it, so yellow for left, and so on and so on. And the children can start and make their algorithm, so make their instructions to move Bbot as they go. It's got a nice little arrow, a nice little path, and it's not too overwhelming because there's not a lot going on, is this? It's not overwhelming for the children. And what children have got to do is take these little blocks, and they've got to again use their fine motor skills to get the little block, a little tile, to fit in to the hole. And as you can see, I'm not sure you can see very well, it lights up blue. I can't see very well on my screen, but it lights up blue, which I think is very nice to show the children that that block has actually fitted in. And the children can make their algorithm, and once they're happy, they can click on go. But we can move this on even further in terms of progression, because we can use functions at the bottom. So this blue tile, you could use a function. And what a function is whatever we code at the bottom here, it's going to repeat it in this blue one here. So if I said to go forward, and then to go right, and then to go left, then that one tile would run that function. So we really have a nice progression there in thinking about what functions are and how we can repeat that function as we go along into the board. So we can definitely move this in to key stage 1 and not just into early years as well. What I really like as well is to help the teacher out as well. It's got a nice little kind of storybook that goes through Cubetto. This is his first day. And it tells a little story about Cubetto as we go, and it helps the children learn about Cubetto as they're using the device, rather than just giving the kids a device, say, well, off you go, let's do some coding. We've got a nice little story, different characters, and the teacher can read the story out, and the children can respond with Cubetto. And also, what you do get are these lovely, really bright and colourful maps. I'm going to cover myself with this now. Okay, yeah, the children upside down. Children to go on. Okay. And the nice thing is you can get different maps as well. So you can get things like ones for Egypt. You can get a blank map and get the kids to draw on the map as well. You can get one for Egypt, space, and they look absolutely fantastic. And Cubetto, a bit like Bebop, will move into these different squares as we're moving along. So we can create a story, we can do a lot of storytelling with the maps as well. And there are extra tiles available, so as you're moving up through the year groups as well, we've got some more different tiles to really push them on with progression. I think the only downside, it does take 6 AA batteries. So I know at my old school, we used to have to get some rechargeable batteries. Otherwise we were going through batteries like there's no tomorrow as well. There are some articles, I know Helen can't put those in right now, but there's a lovely article from a school where we took this into a school here in Telford. There's a video of the Cubetto in action, and an EdTech Direct is one of our main suppliers for a lot of our equipment that we go to, and you can source Cubetto from there as well. On the next slide, this was what I think Helen was doing with some of her children. It was using, again, that kind of unplugged activity of telling that story and getting children to use the arrows or you know, recite them back, and someone could draw the arrows and press the button. And unplugged activities are really, really important, you know, in helping children understand about computational thinking and about how computers work. And I know I saw on one of the Facebook groups the other day, you know, this computing lead said, oh, my school aren't keen to use like the NCC scheme of work. It's got too many unplugged activities in. Well, that's kind of the point. They're really important to help break down those, you know, more complex concepts. It's all about semantic waves that you can read about on the NCCE website. So this kind of planning as well, this unplugged activity, is what we would encourage. I'm sorry. There we go. It's what we'd encourage children to do as they move through the year groups as well, planning out their algorithms before they go onto the device, whether it's on the screen or unplugged as well. And it helps children to understand the robot a little bit more, and they can follow the robot along with their finger on the instructions and see if Cubetto goes the right way. The biggest thing I find children don't know is their left and their right. So I know Rachel said that a good idea is on the top of Cubetto, you could put a little left tile and a little right tile, just to remind children which way is left and which way is right. Because apart from that, you'll find that children really do progress very well in understanding how to write an algorithm. It's just their left and their right. But for a lot of us, it's still a problem, isn't it? I know my girlfriend's like left, right, which way, left and right. Anyway, so next slide is another lovely coding device that when you get this out, I mean, I'm not being sexist, but the boys seem to go wild for the trains, don't they? And we get this out, the boys seem to love the trains and stuff. So this is the Interlino Smart Train. And on the box, it will say from age 0 to 99. So you can really take the Interlino train all the way through from early years, all the way through to year 6, because you can link this to Scratch as well, the Scratch coding platform as well, to program the device on there. The really nice thing is you've got the free app to go with it as well. You've got part of track that comes with the device, because a lot of schools already have the Brio track or the kind of IKEA track. You can use that as well, so you can get the kids to, you know, be creative and create their own track with a lot of the track they're already using in early years, and then putting the train on and kind of blowing their mind as well. And what you do get on the black plastic track that's there, a little bit like the Ozobot. Have you ever seen the Ozobot, where you can create little colours and it will control or give instructions to Ozobot to do different things? It's the same with the Interlino. You get a box of little tiles, and different colours mean they can do different things as well. Great for step telling stories, as we've written on there, and reenacting, you know, the train going along and maybe picking up the carriage, or stopping at the farm, stopping at the station, picking up passengers, letting passengers go, and really telling a story as you go along with Interlino. Okay, next one. So the last one I'm gonna show you because I know there's loads out there. This is very similar to the Bebot. This is Earl, and I quite like Earl because, unlike Bebot, it's got a transparent casing, so you can see inside the device and see how it's working. Because I think a lot of children just see the outside and go, "Wow, that's kind of magic, isn't it? It's magic there. It's just moving along. It's kind of cool." But actually, we can see inside. See that all these little components are actually driving the motor and driving the wheels, and we can see how is working. It's aimed at 3+, but again, you can link it up to like kind of a Scratch-like programming content, so you can use it right up through Key Stage 1 as well. But similar to Bebot, you've got the buttons on there, you've got sounds and lights, which I know the new Bebots or Bluebots have as well. It doesn't take batteries, which is great, so you can recharge it as well. And again, there's another video there of the Earl in use from Richard from Amazing ICT, and just where you can get that from, because it's from Hope Education as well. But there's lots and lots of devices out there, so it's all about what money you've got and what investments you're going to make. But I think in these three that we've looked at, there's really nice progression within them. So as well as they're good for early years, we can always move them into Key Stage 1 as well. Okay, brilliant. I think I'm passing back to Helen, who's going to talk a little bit about the kind of courses that she runs and when her next ones are. All right, thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Paul. So with Amazing ICT, we've run, I think, about maybe 3-4 early years courses to date, and we've got our next one coming up on the 16th of November, and that will be repeated again on the 7th of December. So if you are interested in finding out a bit more about the sort of having programming activities within your setting, it does not have to mean that you're buying one of those bits of equipment that Paul was just talking about, but if you've got any of those, that's just a real benefit and a plus point. But we are going to be talking about some unplugged activities, looking at a couple of those physical devices in some more details, thinking about different activities that you can link them in, making it very nice cross-curricular to cover all those different areas of learning. Paul mentioned as well that document that I've put together, that will be shared with you at the course as well. So the course that's coming up is Exploring Programming in the early years. Like I said, we've got it running twice, so whichever one would suit you best. The price is £55 per school. So let's say you had maybe the computing lead, maybe it's a couple of teachers or practitioners from your early years, maybe it's even your Key Stage 1 teacher who wants to see, what does it look like? What does my subject look like? Or what does computing look like lower down the school? Where are my children coming from? Anybody that wants to then join, it's just £55 for all of those colleagues altogether. So the booking link, Paul, I don't know if you can pop that link into the chat for me. That booking link is there for you, where you can choose which date you would like to go to. And once we get a little bit closer to that date, we'll send out links, because it is a remote event. It'll probably be run just on Teams again, so similar to this, but with a bit more interaction and a lot more ideas for how to teach it, and different links to your areas of learning. Okay, so
sorry, Helen.
No, I was just going to show. Sorry, I was just going to show a couple of ideas of the types of things that we do include when we're running these types of events. So you've got a little focus on language. Like I was saying before, so a focus on unplugged activities. So here we've got Rusty, who's just made out of I think it was a tea bag tin, a special one. And then we've got different types of software that you might want to use, and we'll show you how to use those. Some more ideas for some physical computing as well, and how to use that unplugged. And that's about it. But it's a nice little taster as to what you might get from those courses. Thanks, Georgia.
Not to worry at all. Not to worry at all. This is actually yeah, I just wanted to jump in and to remind again people to have a look at all the other opportunities that you offer to explore technology in early years, and all the work that Amazing ICT does. One of the reasons why I particularly love collaborating with you guys is because your incredible knowledge, your fantastic experience, and the way that you help me understand how to integrate these things with my work as well. So I know for a fact that it will be beneficial to everybody that has wanted to attend today. It will just be more of this, but better, because you will have more of an opportunity to participate. It's been fantastic for me to hear all that you've explained today and understand how all the pieces fit together. But now I would like to use the last 10 minutes of our hour to take some questions. I have noticed how incredibly engaged everybody has been. The moment Paul asked question, everybody was jumping. So I am sure that there are thoughts about this. There's a fair few of you today, so I think it's probably not the best to just open the mics and let everybody join in the conversation. But if you want to pop questions in your in the chat box, we'll make sure to read them aloud and go through them with everybody. In the meantime, I also wanted to remind everybody that I will be sending a recording of this webinar to everybody that has registered, and that will also include the links and especially the link to register for further courses by Amazing ICT. So all the information that you've seen today will be sent to you by email. The only thing that I would stress is to add edu@primotoys.com to your contact list, because I've noticed that it's going to spam. It's going to spam to me. That's probably because it's sent from an automated email platform, and that is quite common. If you don't get a recording, or if you don't get the email, you can email myself at georgia@primotoys.com. I will put my email in the inbox, so I can make sure to send you whatever email you've missed. This said, on with the questions, unless Helen and Paul have something else that they want to add?
No, I'll stop sharing, and then I can just have a look at the chat and see what's coming in.
Absolutely.
Just pop that barefoot link in for you as well there, so have a little look at those resources. Definitely got a whole section dedicated to early years, so definitely check all that out, because it's all absolutely free to get you started.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing the link.
No worries.
I am noticing that there's a couple of people that have literally just joined. I'm not sure if that was an issue with the time zone. I'm really sorry if that was. But again, I will be sending the recording out. So, thank you, Sarah. That's compliments for you guys.
Real. Thanks.
Other things that would be interesting to hear at this point would be whether there's anything of the approaches that Paul and Helen have suggested, something that you've tried already, there's something particular that you struggle with versus things that you feel more confident about. Of course, I'm particularly equipped to answer questions on Cubetto, but I'm really, really keen on today being more about a wide approach to technology in EYFS rather than just on Cubetto itself. So feel free to share your experience. So Paul, is Earl the same as Bbot?
Yeah, very, very similar, just got the buttons on the top, but you can obviously link it to like a block-based programming language, so you can then use progression with that into Key Stage 1 and hook it all up. And like I say, I like the way you can see inside of it. You know, you can see all the components, because I just do think children sometimes don't understand how things work, isn't it? And I think a lot of the curriculum now is more about how do things work and how do computers work, rather than the old curriculum was all about using this technology. It was all like the ICT and using it. Yeah. Whereas now it's all about, you know, the computation side of things, and hence where computational thinking comes in. So it's really key. And I know a lot of schools have had staff meetings on, you know, making sure that they know about computational thinking and what it is, so they can talk about it as well.
On this note, Max asks a really interesting question, which is, with regards to EYFS teaching, how important it is that we get the children to understand the key vocabulary from EYFS, or is it just better to focus on developing the skills, the development skills of the stage?
I think as you're practicing those behaviours and the approaches that you'll find within computational thinking and the characteristics of effective learning, that playing, the exploring, I think vocabulary is just going to come into play anyway as you're talking to the children. Certainly you could be having sort of little vocab cards around the classroom. So if, say, in the construction area, you could ask them questions like, do you need to debug this thing that you've built? My words are going. So they start to understand what the word debug means in terms of, okay, I need to fix it because it didn't quite work. Or maybe they've got the crates outside and they're creating some sort of a car or a rocket, but actually somebody else wants to come and play. So they've just realized they need to add another crate. So they're going to have to evaluate and debug. So that type of language can come in just with anyone who's managing the children outside, or any practitioner who wants to just sort of add in a little bit of that vocab and just prepare the children and get that vocab enhanced. I think from what I'm hearing and from what I've seen post-pandemic, with the children coming in, perhaps the vocabulary can take a little bit of a pause as you're just trying to get the children back to speaking clearly and being able to get their ideas expressed before bringing in that vocab. Maybe a summer term type thing.
Perfect. Thank you, Ellen. A quick answer to who asked, who said that they lost connection, that they've only managed to rejoin us now. Yes, of course, notes will be sent out. A full recording will be sent out, including the links and everything else. So don't worry, just focus on the questions if you can. I think this is still a useful time for you to, focus on. There was a question from Rachel about Earl, whether or not you can download Scratch code into it. Paul, do you know?
Hello there. It's just via a USB link. Yeah, just plug it in and download it. Yeah, simple as that.
Perfect. Madeline has a question about, it's a really good question. I'm just going to read it out loud. Any tips arguing the importance of keeping computing in the EYFS curriculum, especially with children who have low starting points, and therefore there is an argument for other things being a priority instead?
Definitely, and I can absolutely see that point, but I would use technology to enhance those other areas that they're learning about. So if, say, it's their maths and they're just one more, one less, can they really engage the child or children by getting a Cubetto to move along a number ladder? Can it move on one square? Can it move back one square? And what number have we then reached and what number have we gone back to? That type of thing. So it's all about, yes, definitely focus on what their actual biggest needs are, but using technology perhaps to enhance those and really engage the children.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thanks a lot to Rodolfo and Cheryl, who are saying really good things about Cubetto. It's always great to hear about how it's being used. And again, the help of fantastic teachers and EYFS practitioners like Paul and Helen has been paramount in making Cubetto what it is today. So every time I have the opportunity, there's also quite a few of you that I recognize in this list that have been key in making Cubetto what it is today. So thank you all. This is all your merit. Questions have slowed down and we are pretty much at time. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Of course, my inbox, edu@primodoris.com and georgia@primodoris.com are open, and I would be more than happy to relay questions to Paul and Helen. Of course, you can also reach Paul and Helen themselves on Twitter in their emails. I will be sharing their contact details with you in the email. And if you have a lot more questions, then sign up to their upcoming webinars and their professional development courses, because that's really where you want to be. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the rest of Hearts Up, and a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.